Hey guys, I am Ibigandscary. I'm bringing you another StarCraft 2 replay, this time featuring in our bottom right hand side RaR's ImPacT, our red Terran, and his opponent in the top left is going to be NoN ForsakeNXE, our blue Terran. Both players are in High Masters, I believe on the EU server, and we're on Belshir Vestige, and so this is going to be an absolutely fantastic game. I'm not going to lie, I casted like the first 90 seconds, 2 minutes of this game. With no sound, no audio at all. It's very embarrassing, but it's been a while since I've casted anything, so I can cut myself that break. School has started back up, so always a transition period there, but I think I've found my niche of whenever it is appropriate for me to cast, and I've scheduled my time, so I should be getting right back into the swing of things in a relatively short amount of time, so I apologize for the break. Forsaken, though, is he's not going to be given any breaks. Both players are transitioning to that more normal build. Neither of them were sending out SCVs into the field in order to do any sort of cheese, no proxy at all. And it looks like ImPacT is actually queuing up a lot of commands for his SCV, throwing down that barracks at a very traditional, very standard timing. I mean, as soon as he gets those minerals, he's throwing that down, and I don't know, tapping a gas immediately thereafter. In fact, so very, very aggressively right after. It's not gas first or anything like that. He's not going to be doing a super tech build, but it's still so early that he's probably going to be having at least 50 gas in order to produce the Reaper. But you know, maybe he's going to be transitioning over to a factory. It could be like a very early add-on. We'll have to keep an eye on that. It was very aggressive timing for that gas. Speaking of aggressive, Forsaken's taking the exact opposite route. Throwing down the command center first is not going to be very aggressive at all. He's going to be very macro intensive. CC first on this map. Belshir Vestige is a very large map. You can definitely get away with it, especially if you produce up to 3 barracks immediately after the CC, just so you can mass produce those very cheap Marines and kind of just stay alive against whatever the opponent can throw at you. So I believe that that's what Forsaken's going to be going towards. ImPacT has elected to produce a Marine first out of his barracks, which tells me he's going to be using that gas for something else. 100 gas immediately throws down a factory just to the south side of his mineral patch, and the positioning of that factory tells us a couple things. Most importantly, it tells us that it's not going to be used for an add-on from the barracks. He's not going to be dealing with, you know, like super early Hellions out on the field or siege tank or something like that. Nay, it's probably for a Banshee opening. We remember that Banshee Cloak got a little bit cheaper recently, and because of that, it's definitely more popular. We have a second gas coming out, and the factory's going to be able to throw down a tech lab as soon as it's done, and a starport's going to be started up right beside it, and we'll immediately see those Banshees coming out. Unfortunately, Forsaken's not going to be seeing that. He's trying to get in there with his SCV, and ImPacT's like, oh, let me get the door for you. I'll lower that supply depot, no problem at all. But no, don't take the trap. That SCV gets away with 3 hit points. However, he does not get away with anything, any knowledge at all of the interior of ImPacT's base, which is why the positioning is actually pretty clever, because the scan's probably going to be hitting the north side of this more than anything else. However, I mean, Belshir Vestige is not the biggest maps in the world. I mean, you definitely can hit the vast majority of a base with a well-placed scan. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a scan going down in the next 60 seconds from Forsaken, just because he's totally blind of what exactly is going on inside his opponent's base. On the other side of thing, ImPacT has got a pretty good scout out there. He's seen all 3 of those barracks. He knows the gas has been tapped at least once. Second gas is on the way, and the orbital command is already transitioning down to the low ground. We have that traditional bunker coming out, but Cloak has started, and that only takes like 100 seconds. And remember that that's 110 seconds that after that first Banshee gets out there, it can be, you know, you can still be researching as the Banshee's flying over to your base. So in 100 seconds, Forsaken's going to be having to deal with a Cloak Banshee, and that's a lot of trouble. Definitely a lot of trouble whenever you figure out that, you know, without combat shield, those Marines just totally melt away from those Banshees. They can be a threat even against the Marines, which traditionally is your only anti-air option for Terran. So we're going to have to see exactly how he deals with this. It could be that he gets a nice scan off and sees exactly what is going on in his opponent's base. I really am expecting the scan any second now, actually. Cloak is more than halfway done, though. We do have combat shields getting started. However, it's probably going to be 60 seconds after ImPacT is done, and obviously that adds 10 extra hit points, and that's huge, because now your Marines survive 3 volleys, or take 3 volleys to kill from the Banshee, rather than just the traditional 2. So it's very nice to get that combat shield upgrade out there, and that's something that I learned very recently, because I always thought that maybe Stim would be better. I don't understand the subtle nuances of playing Terran so much, and so I had to really get in there and devil in why you get combat shields first. And this is one of the major reasons, is because your Marines need to survive against the volleys from those Banshees so that they can actually get underneath them and do extra damage, and sometimes that's even more important than the ability to get underneath them because of stim. Really nice play here of getting that missile turret out there. In fact, I'm almost positive, and I want to look away from the Banshee just for a second to see if Forsaken did scan the base, and yeah, he totally did. He scanned it, saw the starport and the factory. He did not see the add-on on the starport. However, due to the position of the starport right by the factory, it's totally safe to assume that that's exactly what's going on. And he knew that this Cloak Banshee was coming out there, and because of that, he got that static detection up. He's got his Marines now with combat shield. You see how many volleys it takes. It takes 3 volleys to bring down that Marine. They're left with 7 hit points, and even putting the weakened one inside the bunker, a clever play there. Kind of minimizing the amount of damage that you would expect from a Cloak Banshee. 3 workers killed total. Lost a handful of Marines, but totally worth it because ultimately he took down that Banshee. If that Banshee had survived, it could be significantly more devastating to Forsaken, because, you know, they do a heck of a lot of damage. They're very useful in breaking siege tank lines, and Forsaken right now only has Marines out there. So speaking of siege tanks, ImPacT is going to be playing the bully once again. Has his 2 siege tanks kind of leapfrogging towards the natural expansion because Forsaken did take an economic risk, and you can see that reflected in his income. 40 to 36 harvesters right now. He's booming in the mineral income, not so much in the gas, but he's not as gas intensive because he's playing Terran Bio. Stim and +1 on the way for Forsaken, but the siege tanks are encroaching upon the natural, and really Forsaken doesn't have the utensils necessary to break this. He doesn't have stim, so he can get right on top of them. He doesn't have any air support, no medics to keep his units in pristine health, so he can only take 1 or 2 volleys from these siege tanks, and he's going to be in for a world of hurt. Really, ImPacT is playing this very, very well, keeping that second Banshee alive so he can be spotting the high ground and encroaching with his siege tanks, even though he's got a much smaller ground force in the form of his Marines, and his Marines are unupgraded. They don't have combat shield, and they won't have +1 when it finishes for Forsaken. But ImPacT is doing his best to keep them alive, also keeping that bunker up, even though it has those weakened Marines inside. This Banshee is just being a jerk. He's taken 3 kills total right now, but that's quickly climbing as he's just pecking away, staying on the edge of the missile turret's detection range. And this is nice out of Forsaken, is to keep his SCVs up. Something that ImPacT could totally do is to target down these SCVs individually, make it so that the siege tanks are actually firing on them instead of the bunker. Obviously, you need to physically choose to do that, and you know, taking down those SCVs is ultimately a blow to the economy, and also something that you can actually succeed in killing, because right now this bunker is not going to be going anywhere with 3 SCVs repairing it. +1 is done for Forsaken's ground forces. He's going to have stim in a handful of seconds, and that might be enough to turn the tide of battle. However, one of the weakened Banshees comes within range of that bunker, and unfortunately it gets targeted down. The other ones are forced to pull back. Wow, that one only 3 hit points as it runs out of energy. Takes a couple of extra pot shots at the bunker and is forced to pull back. Now with Forsaken having 1 siege tank up on the high ground and a 2nd bunker, it really doesn't look like ImPacT is going to be able to break this. Obviously, Forsaken is losing a lot of mining time from these SCVs being forced to pull them off. But I think ImPacT felt like he really wanted to get in there, and oh, what is this? Forsaken is moving in with a cluster of Marines. Now that stim and +1 is done, he's pushing in, immediately crushes the siege tank that was left to protect the natural, and the natural is left totally exposed. Now we've got 10 to 10 workers killed, and that number is quickly climbing, and we can tell that Forsaken has succeeded in pulling back the vast majority of ImPacT's ground force, wedging his Marines right in between the mineral line and the factory, making it so he can't get a surround from these SCVs. But it looks like a Hellion is going to be popping out. 2 Hellions are going to be popping out with blue flame upgrade. And those Marines just melt away, and ImPacT knows that he's succeeded in holding off this small aggressive push from Forsaken. He drops down the mules, but oh my goodness, he has suffered a lot of damage. 36 to 11 workers killed, and more importantly, ImPacT has given up his position. He's given up the ability of being able to shell down damage on that natural. He had to pull back with his siege tanks because he pulled back with everything else. He did a really good job of cleaning that up. The blue flame upgrade on the Hellions totally saved his bacon. It was very well done by him, but also Forsaken definitely did a lot of damage, and he's going to be feeling very comfortable with his position right now. 47, almost 50 harvesters, over 30. So he is definitely in the lead. Economically speaking, I wouldn't be surprised. He does have his third CC down. He's probably thinking about taking that third, but he's also thinking about ending the game right now. He's pushing out with those 1-1 Marines. Combat Shield and Stim is done. He's got more than a handful of siege tanks to support them, and also medevacs, making it so that his Marines can be rapidly split up if he runs into the impressive siege tank wall holding at the front. All Forsaken needs to do is take an aggressive posture, lift off half of his Marines, and drop them in the main, and then all of a sudden ImPacT is left in a very precarious situation. He's got to have to defend both fronts. So it's going to be up to ImPacT to really answer back to this, and unfortunately Forsaken's checking down to the third, but that means that the drop is going to probably, a poke right here, and then the drop down into the natural, if there's going to be a drop, and that's really going to make it so that Forsaken's drops are going to be far less effective than if one was happening in the main, say, because ImPacT will be able to walk a very short distance to support them, a very minor readjustment of his siege tanks. It looks like 1 or 2 siege tanks from both players are going down. A couple of the Marines getting baited into the siege tank line, just melted away. The Raven left with 20 hit points. Oh man, it's got a lot of energy too. Throws down 2 Hunter Seeker missiles right on top of the cluster of Marines. Oh man. The vast majority of the Marines had actually melted away because of the siege tank line before the Hunter Seeker missiles actually hit. Oh, cool. Oh, I was hoping that the large splots were medevacs and not siege tanks, but no, this is fine too. The medevacs are actually over here supporting this base, and it looks like Forsaken is going to be completely cleaned up with absolutely everything. Wow, those siege tanks and Marines just totally melted away. The Hellbats really getting right on top of those Marines and just destroying everything that Forsaken had there. And the economic advantage is pretty much melted away too. So 53 over 45 harvesters. Yeah, that's just a little bit in the favor of Forsaken. He does have that third orbital out there. Third orbital from ImPacT is being positioned down third, but ImPacT is now a field with a very intimidating siege tank army, and Hellbats, this third's going to have to lift off in just a handful of seconds. This is actually really bad for Forsaken because he just dropped a mule there too. So no, that mule's going to be totally useless. A lot of wasted minerals there. And at the same time, ImPacT is securing his own third, and Forsaken really doesn't have the ground force necessary to stop ImPacT's push into that third. I think maybe with those siege tanks siege. Oh, you know what? If ImPacT wanted to, he could just 1A into that siege tank line and crush it also, because Forsaken just does not have the standing force necessary to hold them back. He does have the upgrades though. I mean, 2-2 is on the way. Combat Shield's coming out. And we switch over to the upgrades, which I think is G. Yes, it is G. +1 ground and blue flame is the only thing that ImPacT has going for him. He's got +2 ground vehicles for Terran coming out. He's just now starting it actually. So his Hellbats and siege tanks are going to be very intimidating, and this drop, of course, is very intimidating. Blue flame. These are the pre-nerf Hellbats really, and they are just doing a work on top of all those siege SCVs and Marines in that mineral line. However, the siege is continuing. I mean, both of them are pretty much at a standstill. Supplies are pretty much right on top of each other. However, that's in the favor of ImPacT because ImPacT has succeeded in securing his third, and Forsaken is just now repositioning his into the top right-hand side. It looks like a siege tank is, it's probably going to go down, especially with the second Hellbat being dropped right on top of him. Actually, some drop micro going on. That poor Marauder really didn't have a chance against 2 Hellbats, but he did do a surprising amount of damage. Look at that. That is a lot, and with 2 more Marauders coming in, it looks like that drop is finally going to get cleaned up, which is absolutely banging for Forsaken because he needs to get back to work. He needs to start making a large force, re-sieging his siege tanks. I wonder why he unsieged that. Maybe he was thinking about repositioning over to the third to protect that because that is very delicate. And yeah, there goes the scan from Forsaken. He was worried that this force had repositioned over to the third that he had taken to the top right-hand side, and is thinking, as soon as that force moves, I'm going to have to move too because the siege tanks are going to be incredibly out of position. Couple ballsy Vikings pushing forward, but with only 2, that's really not enough to bring down any of the medevacs and 1 or 2 volleys. You really want to have 4 Vikings out there so you can just target down those medevacs in 1 or 2 volleys, dart in, and really keep that number in check because this is a very intimidating number from Forsaken. He's got a lot of medevacs out there, which means he's got a lot of drop potential. He's just lacking in ground units because his Marines are really getting sopped up by all those siege tanks, and this is an incredibly intimidating army from ImPacT. I mean, look at that siege tank line. That's going to be ridiculous as soon as it gets started. A couple of siege tanks being way too nosy, poking up into Forsaken's army, and you know what? That's totally what he needed, because now Forsaken is aware of the fact that ImPacT is moving over to the third. He saw those siege tanks moving, knows exactly where ImPacT would have to click in order to move his forces out there, sending one single stemmed, oh, not even a stemmed Marine. He doesn't even get the drugs before he gets targeted down by all those siege tanks. But no, Forsaken knows where this is. Look at this supply discrepancy, and this was after Forsaken did so much damage to the economy early on. 199 to 155 in the favor of ImPacT, and so Forsaken's really going to have to even up this score, and it looks like that's exactly what he's going to be doing with another drop down to the bottom left hand side. It looks like a small contingency from ImPacT is going for the intercept. However, remember that mech for Terran is very immobile, it's very slow, meaning that Forsaken's going to be able to get in there and do a lot of damage before those Hellbats arrive, and even if he does siege those siege tanks up on the high ground, he won't be able to stop Forsaken pushing into the mineral line. However, Hellbats are really good units, and they succeed in pushing back Forsaken, but you know what, that bought him enough time, because that did peel off a sizable chunk of ImPacT's army and make it so that ImPacT couldn't get frisky, couldn't push off into the third, and allows Forsaken to actually focus on his own production. Look at that production tab for ImPacT. Absolutely nothing being produced, specifically no upgrades. Obviously he's pretty much maxed out on supply, but you could definitely be throwing down some extra infrastructure rather than banking all this army. He is still on just 2-0, so I am sorely lacking in a lot of the upgrades, especially on 3-3 on the way for Forsaken. So his Bioforce is going to be increasingly intimidating. If he had a Bioforce, his Marines and Marauders are getting chewed to pieces in just a handful of seconds against all the back and forth action from those Hellbats. The Banshee's still doing a lot of work against the siege tanks now that the Marines have been cleaned up. Really not a lot of anti-air to answer back to them, but it was enough to bring down that one just terrible Banshee, just doing just enough damage to justify its existence before it gets cleaned up by those Marines. On the other side of things, Forsaken was doing a little bit of damage to that command center. He's got a small contingent down to the bottom left-hand side. Looks like he's going to be going for another push in here. However, this time ImPacT has nothing in the area to support them. He added on a lot of infrastructures, finally adding on that infrastructure over by that fourth base that he's taken. However, that means that a lot of his reinforcements are going to be rallied up here as ImPacT starts to siege that third that has been taken by Forsaken to the top right-hand side. Supplies have actually kind of normalized, and that's because of the economic damage that's being done by Forsaken down in the bottom left-hand side and also up into that fourth. He's actually doing a lot of damage to those workers and has succeeded in cleaning up this. I don't know if he's going to be able to kill this orbital before the siege tanks get in there, but no, it looks like the siege tanks are being kind of defensive in their positioning of the siege tank mode, making so that they can't target down those Marines, and they do get the kill on that orbital command. That's a major win for Forsaken, because as time goes on, I mean, the naturals have been completely mined out, or the main's been completely mined out. Natural is definitely getting to be mined out, and the fourth has been locked down. So all of a sudden, ImPacT's economy is looking really pathetic compared to Forsaken, who's just now succeeded in taking his fourth. It's not saturated at all, but we can see on the mini map that he's beginning to add in stuff, and because of that, his economy is booming, and he's going to be able to quickly resupply. He's keeping his minerals down. He's got plenty of gas saved up. And I'd love to see him continue to add on infrastructure. Another massive drop going down on top of that fourth. That one mining base that ImPacT had just a second ago is completely cleaned up. The Marines wedging themselves in the mineral line, but unfortunately that works in the favor of those Hellbats, and they have no trouble at all cleaning them up. But every single one of the Hellbats go down, leaving only the siege tanks left to actually do enough damage to force that drop back. The third or fourth, I don't even know what number this one is, the bottom left expansion has been retaken by ImPacT, and it's pretty much his only mining base right now. You can just see that reflected in his mineral income. Forsaken has not moved his siege tank line in forever, but it's because ImPacT is also being very stale with his own force. And this is something that you can do when you have 100% control of the opponent. If like the second you see a drop coming out from your opponent, then you move in because you know he's lacking in a lot of his ground force. But now that the supply depot has stabilized, Forsaken can afford to send out 1 or 2 medevac of just units. That's something that Terran Bio does exclusively well. And so, unfortunately for ImPacT, the window of opportunity when he could bully Forsaken has totally gone away, and so now ImPacT is going to have to start thinking about, okay, how do I force engagements? How do I make it so that Forsaken has to come to me, come into my siege tank line? And I think he's going to be relying on the air superiority, and I think that's a great decision. He's got a lot of Vikings out, 4 Vikings, 2 more on the production tab, and that's going to be enough for him to start to weed out some of these medevacs. And I think the medevacs agree with me. They're like, no, I'm going to go away. I'm going to load up with a bunch of units and push out, and he's going to be relying on his siege tanks to actually hold them back. Only a handful of Marines trying to clean up these Banshees, but 4 Banshees out on the field, they have absolutely no issues in cleaning them up, and unfortunately a bunch of Marauders coming in who are unable to fire upward. It looks like some Hellbats just an inch or 2 shy of getting into that mineral line. Finally, ImPacT, aware of that, is going to be pushing in there. It's going to be doing a lot of economic damage, actually. However, look at all this blue down here by the 4th at the same time. Forsaken pushing in with a handful of Marauders that have been stemmed, and it looks like the Banshees, there's so much action in all sorts of different areas. The Banshees succeeding in taking care of every anti-air that Forsaken had covering his siege tanks, and are going to be cleaning up every single one of those siege tanks. At the same time, Forsaken is pushing down to the bottom left-hand side, has cleaned up that base, but ImPacT, now that he sees that there's no anti-air, has unsieged his army and is pushing forward, and is going to be cutting Forsaken in half, making it so that his main mining base to the top right-hand side is cut off from any of the reinforcement that could be coming from Forsaken's main base. At the same time, that Doom Drop with so many Marauders is just wrecking the natural, and it's going to be pushing up in a handful of seconds into the main for ImPacT. ImPacT has taken an eye for an eye and is succeeding in taking out the natural of Forsaken, but again, both of these were non-mining bases, and this is a much bigger deal for Forsaken than for ImPacT, because ImPacT has all this infrastructure right here, and he's going to be able to spin down his money and keep a lot of his army reinforced. However, Forsaken, the vast majority of his infrastructure is right here. I think he's got like a handful of, no, these are just supply depots over here, not even barracks. So unfortunately for him, all of his infrastructure is going to get cleaned down. However, that does mean that every bit of reinforcement is going to be focused into that main, and he's going to be able to mount a very sturdy defense. Unfortunately, that siege tank does get cleaned up, and so he's going to have to go toe-to-toe with these Hellbats, which is never a comfortable situation. It looks like the main Bioforce from Forsaken in the main has been pretty cleaned up, actually, and it looks like he's going to have to retreat now that the Banshees have arrived back. Probably half of the Bioforce has been totally cleaned up. Oh, but Forsaken has found the resupply area. He's found that last remaining portion of infrastructure, and those Marauders, even taking a lot of damage from the Banshees, even taking some damage from those siege tanks, are still doing a lot of damage to that infrastructure. Speaking of damage to the infrastructure, only 2 or 3 Hellbats are left, so ImPacT is going to have to be very careful, because the second he unsieges, these Marines are just waiting to stem and push on top of that. Looks like a Hellbat drop is going on into the top right hand side, and that is just decimating the economy for both players. Is actually pretty much in shambles. Both of them are pretty much on one mining base too. Forsaken managing to make it out there with 2 orbital commands, a 3rd orbital command over here to the top right hand side, and those siege tanks, did I miss it? No, I did not. Still, those Marines are being just waiting, they're biding their time, waiting to actually push in there. Oh, those Banshees are not cloaked, and oh no, there's only like 3 Marines in there, so no, that's not enough anti-air to actually clean that up. Speaking of cleaned up, looks like every single one of those SCVs died, and ooh, I was worried that the orbital command went down, but no, it's still alive too. So even though both players have a large discrepancy of the amount of buildings that are on the field, I would say things are pretty even right now, actually. Both players are on one base. Both players have a very large standing army, 91 over 93 supply, but only 10 harvesters each. Forsaken doing a lot of economic damage. However, I think the economic damage is going to be returned in kind, as some Hellbats and siege tanks are making their way up into the one mining base that Forsaken has, and so both of their mineral incomes and gas incomes are going to be plummeted in just a handful of seconds. Oh no! Forsaken manages to sneak out his standing force right here, rather than directly engage those siege tanks, loaded them up, brought them over here, and is just like, who needs my main base? I don't need my main base. I can make my main base right here. So he lifts off with his medevacs, drops them in here, and succeeds in rebuffing the small poke from ImPacT, and that means he's got a pretty decent economy. 12 harvesters over 4. That's great for the 33-minute mark. Are you kidding me? But he also has 3 orbital commands, meaning that he can throw down a bunch of mules and really just kind of powerhouse his way through this. And it looks like every single one of the Vikings have gone down. A lot of Banshees are still out on the field, though. have to be very careful about that. The Marines managed to poke their way into the siege tank line. Managed to do a lot of damage to the siege tanks, but not enough to actually make their way out. At least half of the Marines and Marauders get instantly melted by the siege tank, and now the siege tanks are sieging up in range, and yes, another volley brings every single thing to tears from Forsaken, and now it looks like ImPacT is out for blood. He is just shelling down so much damage with those intimidating Banshees, and accompanied by those siege tanks. Obviously Forsaken, he could just take back the sky. He really wouldn't have to worry about those Banshees, but he doesn't have the infrastructure necessary to produce those Vikings. He does have a single starport, and maybe that starport could take advantage of one of these reactors to get out those Vikings 2 at a time, but even 2 at a time, he's going to have to deal with ImPacT, who he also has a starport with, I'm assuming, a reactor. No, they all have tech labs. Nice. All have tech labs, but he's got 2 Vikings out there right now. So this is actually a very, very dangerous situation for Forsaken. Really, ImPacT just needs to move his siege tanks just a little bit closer, start doing some damage. He doesn't want to move in with his Banshees because of the missile turret, but now that that missile turret has gone down, he's really only got to deal with 8 Marines right now, and that is not enough to deal with 9 or 10 Banshees that are out on the field. Small strike force death squad of the Marauders are moving into the infrastructure, but really ImPacT is doing the damage necessary to nail a hole in the coffin for Forsaken. This is looking grim. This is definitely looking grim. Those Marines with the scan are pushing forward. Only 4 Banshees are here, but it's because some of the Banshees have been called back home to deal with that death squad. It looks like 2 or 3 of those Marauders are still alive, even though they did not succeed in taking out the infrastructure there, are trying to supply block ImPacT, which is really the only reason you would attack the structures down here, is just to see if you can supply block and hold back that economy, hold back the reinforcements that are happening up here in the third right now. Does Forsaken have any orbitals left? He does. He's got 2. Orbital over here and an orbital over here, which is actually mining, which is more than ImPacT can say, because ImPacT is repositioning his command center. He's got another command center that has been constructed in the bottom left-hand side. He's going to be putting to work all 8 of his harvesters. So both players are not really stabilized. I would definitely put the favor in ImPacT's hands right now. He's got a lot of those siege tanks, a lot of those Banshees, but if you look at the supply, it's actually a lot closer than I would expect. Forsaken, where are you hiding these units? Is it over here at your main? Yeah, he's got a handful of Widow Mines, a handful of Marines. Widow Mine's not going to be doing the most damage against siege tanks. However, if he could bait those Banshees into those Widow Mines, he could definitely swing this back into a little bit more of a favorable position for him. And I would say that the Banshees are the most delicate to that, the most easily baited. So yeah, he's got to worry about those siege tanks. He's really got to worry about what exactly ImPacT knows where the majority of his force is. But Forsaken still has a standing force. He's still got enough to work with. He definitely needs to play cat and mouse. He cannot afford to directly engage in that siege tank line. And on the other hand, ImPacT, he's a little bit behind on the economy, because yeah, he's got 8 to 3. Oh no, what happened to the SCVs? I thought Forsaken had like 14 SCVs just a handful of seconds ago, and I don't think I missed a drop. Maybe I missed an interception. Maybe those SCVs were transitioning from this base over to one of these and they got intercepted. It looks like ImPacT is going to be cleaning up this base in the bottom left hand side. No, he's just ignoring that infrastructure, ignoring it, because really Forsaken doesn't have the money necessary to actually deal with that. Pulling back once again. Forsaken really doesn't want to engage in range of those siege tanks. He's got a lot of Marines out there, but they're so delicate against those siege tanks. And remember, those siege tanks do have +2, so they can do quite a lot of damage. ImPacT at 53/62 supply, but still with a very tech-heavy army. I mean, those Banshees and siege tanks do a lot of damage, and while Forsaken does have a very large force, like a supply-wise, he's got a 10 or 11 supply advantage, so I don't know if I really stretch so far as to say it's large, but it's larger than what ImPacT has. And at the same time, ImPacT does have a lot of tech advantage. I mean, those siege tanks and these Banshees, if they go toe-to-toe with the Marines, dollar for dollar, I would say that ImPacT has a more intimidating force. However, that force is not going to be supplied anytime soon, because once again, the economy for ImPacT is shattered. That orbital command is going to get cleaned up, and it looks like the Banshees are out for blood, pushing forward, managing to take down that siege tank. However, at the cost of their lives, another duo of Banshees are going to be pushing forward, but it looks like the bottom left-hand base from ImPacT is totally cleaned up. 34 over 56. All of a sudden, ImPacT is really just going to be relying exclusively on his siege tanks. Again, there's no Banshees out on the field for Forsaken. He doesn't have anything that can clean up these siege tanks while making it look pretty. He's going to have to engage in that siege tank line eventually, and when that happens, if ImPacT has all of his siege tanks sieged, even if Forsaken has a massive supply advantage, he's going to get cleaned up immediately, and he doesn't. In fact, Forsaken is lifting off his command center to the top right-hand side because he's not 100% sure where these siege tanks are. It could be that they're headed up there. Instead, they're headed down to protect their own infrastructure and protect the last mining base. That orbital command is up, does have enough energy to throw down a mule, and that might be enough to get out a handful more Hellbats, just a little bit bigger of a meat shield to protect these siege tanks, which is really the only thing that ImPacT has going for him now. The number of Banshees is down just to 1. Wow, he's just down to 1. And those Banshees were really a powerful tool, but I guess Forsaken has transitioned over just to exclusively Marines. He's got a single siege tank on the production tab, another one trundling over to protect that third, and it looks like now that the all clear has been given, he's retaking that expansion to the top right-hand side, and he's super thankful that that infrastructure is still up back at home. I mean, I believe these 2 barracks were the first barracks that he actually built, adding on those reactors pretty much immediately. 45 over 58 supply. This is absolutely ridiculous how close this game is, even at the 43-minute mark. I mean, like, you always see it with somebody with a massive advantage at this time. Even if it gets this close, you're like, oh, well, this guy has battlecruisers out, and so, yeah, they're pretty much the same supply, but battlecruisers totally beat, you know, Marines or something like that. But now it's really going to be down to who can engage more favorably. It's totally going to be up to positioning, totally going to be up to who can catch who unsieged. So the siege tanks from ImPacT are pushing forward. However, they're just barely within range of one of the siege tanks taking a handful of pot shots. However, that last Banshee with just 10 hit points and 5 energy left manages to eke out a single kill on that siege tank, which represents half of the siege tanks that Forsaken had. And with only just 1 left, that last 10 hit point Banshee is scouting out, really just being invaluable to ImPacT. At the same time, it looks like the units are cleaning up in the bottom left-hand side, have succeeded in supply blocking ImPacT substantially, actually. Wow, down to just to 11 supply, just the supply being provided by that orbital command. So ImPacT is definitely make and break right now, and he doesn't know about the expansion at the top right-hand side. And I don't think Forsaken does either, because it's totally not saturated except for a single SCV. No, it's making SCVs. Well, whatever. It's making SCVs, and it looks like this orbital command is going to be forced to lift off with 700 hit points. I don't think that Viking is going to succeed in covering the cleaning up that orbital before it can escape back to the welcoming arm of those SCVs and kind of heal that up. No, they're just going to abandon it. Good for them. Good for them. Screw that orbital. At the same time, we have another drop from Forsaken. He's going to be trying to once again supply block ImPacT because he built a ridiculous number of supply depots in a very short period of time. However, the siege tanks have unsieged from ImPacT and have pulled back, and it looks like the orbital command that was in the this location, just look at the minimap, it's right there, and that location is going to be pushing back to this hard point for Forsaken. He's going to be strongly and fully defending this location. Yeah, he's sieging up his siege tank. He's got his Marines positioned over by the rocks, just using as many as few units as he has to the most of his abilities. Still doing drops, still looking around there. He's using those factories that he doesn't have enough money to produce off of just to scout the different expansion locations that ImPacT would had. And he knows that ImPacT has one base. He knows that ImPacT is totally starved because he's not seeing a bunch of Hellbats. All he's seeing is that a very defensive siege tank heavy army from ImPacT is very immobile, and so as long as Forsaken plays cat and mouse, he's definitely got this. But it's still so close, because if ImPacT has his siege tank sieged and Forsaken pushes in there after stimming, he's done. He's done in one volley. We've seen that already. We've seen that happen. So it's definitely in the wheelhouse. However, Forsaken has his economy up and running. He's still got his infrastructure back at home, and because of that infrastructure, he's slowly eking out a more substantial supply lead. So 74 over 47 supply right now. These Marines have really got to be careful to push in there, and these 2 siege tanks are enough to hold back these Marines. And unfortunately for him, ImPacT has elected to retreat once again, and that's just giving Forsaken more and more time to produce. Now he's producing Vikings. Now he's slowly taking back the area. He's going to be able to clean up that last Banshee, and then probably go toe-to-toe with that very weak Viking. And then once those area units are done, his siege tanks are going to be incredibly weak because they're not going to be able to scout high ground. And Belshir Vestige has a lot of ramps. He's got a lot of high and low ground. And if you can't scout that, your siege tanks really don't have the line of sight necessary to hack those Marines as soon as they get within range. And they really limit the mobility of ImPacT. He's going to be terrified in just a handful of seconds. Where's that Viking? Where's that Viking? Two Vikings pushing out here right now. They're going to be immediately cleaning up the one Viking that can't cloak. And as soon as the Banshee runs out of cloak, it's going to get cleaned up too. And it looks like Forsaken knows exactly where it is. There goes the scan, and with that, ImPacT knows immediately. He pulls back immediately because he just does not have high ground advantage anymore. He's going to have to keep himself away from as many ramps as possible. No, he's pushing up the ramp right now. Pushing up the ramp, but unable to view the siege tank that's shelling down damage. He's going to have to retreat until the siege tanks can't fire on him. But no, the Marines from Forsaken seizing the opportunity, pushing forward, catching the majority of those siege tanks unsieged, and half of them immediately melt away. And with the rest of them there, oh, that siege tank line totally gets cleaned up. What a frustrating end for ImPacT. He had this great unit control. He was playing so well with those siege tanks. And he was relying on the air superiority that he had. He was really using those Banshees to the fullest of their potential. He kept making those Banshees, and frankly, I don't like doing that at all. Like, I hate doing that. I always switch over to more Viking production and also some medevac so I can do Hellbat drops. I never used those Banshees like that, but he really had those Banshees out there. He was using the cloak to make it so he could aggressively scout Forsaken's army, and because of that, he got a lot of pot shots off on Forsaken's army and really kept those Marine numbers in check. And we saw that because Forsaken only did 1 or 2 drops that were very successful. I mean, obviously he did like 4 or 5 drops, but some of them were just a handful of Marines thrown at ImPacT, and they didn't do a lot. And then the ones that did work a lot were after Forsaken really devoted a large chunk of his army, and because of that, ImPacT carved out a lot of map control. However, he just couldn't capitalize on it. I feel like he was feeling frustrated and kind of distracted by all the aggression from Forsaken, so he kept pulling back his army, pulling back and peeling off little bits of it to defend, instead of relying on his own, reinforcement, that mechanical Terran machine of just constantly churning out units, so that you can rely on your reinforcements to actually clean up the drop play. And that's one of the hallmarks of those absolutely fantastic players, is to know exactly how many units are going to be popping out in a handful of seconds, and can I deal with this drop that's being dropped right now. So ImPacT, fantastic Terran mech player. That was absolutely gravy. I would just trust yourself a little bit more. I would trust in your infrastructure, make it so you're continually churning out Hellions and Hellbats once you have them out there, so that you can actually deal with the drop play that was coming out of Forsaken. Forsaken, I don't know. I have no idea how to critique that. You stayed on top of your upgrades. You stayed on top of your drop play. I don't know. I would caution you with losing the air battle so early. You kind of let the Banshee number spiral out of control. I mean, he was up to 8 or 9 of them at one time, and that is just absolutely ridiculous, because those Banshees can kill anything at a drop of a hat. But you know that because they did that in this map, and you still won. So absolutely fantastic. Thanks, guys, for stopping by. This was a long video, but I enjoyed it. So if you have a game you want me to cast, you could PM me here or on Reddit. One way or another, I will see you guys later. I am Big and Scary. Bye.